everybody. Yeah, my name's Charlotte. I am a forest school trainer, an FSA endorsed trainer, and I'm based in Suffolk. In addition to training, I run forest school sessions for parent and toddlers, holiday club. I run wellbeing sessions and forest bathing. So that's me, and I will hand over to Sarah.
Hello everyone, good evening. My name's Sarah. I've been a forest school leader for about 8 years now, based in North Essex, just on the border between South Cambridgeshire and Suffolk. And I've been running sessions in schools and home ed sessions and family sessions. And last year I started my training to become a forest school trainer, which I'm now partway through training my first cohort with my mentor, Charlotte, here. And we thought we'd tell you a little bit about the process.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So I volunteered to do this session with Sarah because I was where perhaps some of you are about 10 years ago. I'd been running forest school for about 3 years, and I was kind of thinking about next steps and how I could develop my business. In my former life, I'd been a primary school teacher. I was a head teacher for a number of years, and I had also done some tuition with a university. So I felt that I'd got perhaps something that I could offer, but I wasn't sure how to go about it. So I started asking around. But I have to say, I found that there wasn't much information out there. And so I kind of relied on other people, telling me their experiences. It was kind of a bit confusing. I was advised not to do it quite strongly. But I decided usually when somebody tells me not to do something, that makes me go the other way. So I kind of embarked on the journey a little bit blind, not really knowing and finding out a bit along the way. But I was well supported. And the journey was interesting and harder than I thought it was going to be. So what we would like to do this evening is to share our experiences. So mine from a few years ago, Sarah's more recently, hopefully an honest sharing of our experiences and be able to give you the knowledge to the best of our abilities from our own experience and also from talking with other trainers. Because when I was putting this presentation together and a guidance note that I'd written previously that I shared at a conference a couple of years ago, I did a bit of a survey of the other trainers in the Indoors Trainers group just to ask them, how did you become a trainer? So I could get a bit of an idea about different routes into it. So there will be opportunities for questions at the end, but obviously any time throughout the presentation, do put questions in the chat and we will try and keep our eye on those. And if you've got anything to share, because it may be that some of you have got knowledge that we don't know about. So if you've got anything to share, then please feel free to do that by putting things in the chat as well. Okay, so why do you want to become a trainer? Okay, so I'd like you to just have a minute to think about this for yourself and either jot it down, or you could put it in the chat. Some ideas about why you might want to become a trainer. And while you're doing that, I'm going to ask Sarah. Sarah, why did you want to become a trainer?
There were lots of reasons. I think I wanted to take the next step and deepen my knowledge and understanding of forest school. And also, I think, share what's so special about forest school with others and increase the opportunities for more children to experience forest school. And I was looking forward to working with adults and using my previous sort of assessment skills again. And I thought it felt like it was coming full circle, I think, for me. So it seemed like the next step. But quite a big one, I think. You sort of mentioned yours, Charlotte. Do you want to just give us your key points, what your reasons were again?
Yeah, I think for me, it was just a new challenge. I just felt that it would be something that would be interesting to do. I really loved my training. And I kind of thought, I'd like to be able to share that and inspire people and, give people a really good deal and also ensure that they're really well prepared for embarking on their journey to be a forest school leader. So I just thought, maybe this is something that I could do and I'd like to do. And also, from a business point of view, I thought maybe this is something that will add an extra dimension to my business. So they were my reasons. I don't know if anybody has got any that they wish to share or maybe just reflect on your own reasons. Because it's a really important thing, I think. If you're going to embark on this journey, I think the first thing to do before you start is to really ask yourself that question of what are your reasons for becoming a trainer, because it's not an easy thing to do. It's time consuming and it's quite costly. And so you just need to be really sure that it's the right thing for you. So that's what I would advise. So some questions for you to consider before you embark on this journey. So I've got some questions there listed. And what we're going to do is explore each of those questions. And hopefully that will give you a bit of, an opportunity for you to think about those things yourself and to see whether or not you're in a position to start on the journey and whether it's what you really want to do. Okay, so let's go through them one at a time. And I should just say that the presentation will be made available. So if people want to, you don't need to make loads of notes, you can come back to it. So the first question is, are you suitably qualified? So when I started out on my journey, I had no real idea about whether or not I had the appropriate qualifications to be able to become a trainer. I kind of assumed that I did, having been a primary teacher. I've done some tuition for the university, but I didn't really know. So in general, in order to become a trainer, awarding organisations, and we'll come on to what awarding organisations are a little bit later, but in general, trainers would be expected to have a level 3 forest school leader qualification. Might sound obvious, but I'm just putting it out there. And also a teaching or training qualification that demonstrates that they've been trained in assessing at secondary school level or older. So in other words, if you are a primary school teacher, then you would need to have something additional to back up the fact that you have got that experience. You'd need some additional experience of assessing older children or adults. Okay, so what does that look like? Well, there we are. There's a nice list. So you may have one of these qualifications. If you don't have one of these qualifications, there are routes into training which actually provide you with a qualification along the way. So if you don't have the appropriate qualifications, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't, that you've got to study or do something else before you embark on your journey. So there are routes into training where you actually get a qualification along the way. But there is a list there of different quals that you may have, which would give you the appropriate qualification to be able to go start your training or become a trainer. So you can see there that if you have primary school qualification, you'll need to have additional evidence of assessing post-16 qualifications. Okay, So that's the first question, is do you have the appropriate qualifications? Secondly, do you have sufficient experience? So I know that when I started my training, in fact, even on my initial training week, already in the back of my mind, I was thinking, maybe I could do this. I could perhaps become a forest school trainer. Maybe that's something I'd like to do. But you can't do it straight away as soon as you've got your level 3 qualification. So a potential forest school trainer will have to have their level 3 and post level 3 at least 2 years of experience facilitating forest school themselves in accordance with all 6 principles with a variety of client groups. And that makes sense, really, because if you're going to be training people, you need to have had that experience of working with those a range of different client groups, different ages, and you need to have, you know, kind of walked in the shoes and lived that experience before you can think about embarking on training yourself. So sufficient experience is the second one. I'm going to hand over to Sarah.
Time and resources is the next consideration that you need to have here. And I think Charlotte and I would both say that you'd need more of both than you think. Consider as well whether it's the right time for you with your work and family commitments. There are periods where the training, as you will have known if you've done level 3, where it's quite intense and quite takes up a lot of quite long days, and then there are periods of time where it's a bit quieter, and then it sort of picks up. So there are sort of peaks and troughs in demands in that way. So we've talked a bit about well, there are different routes into becoming a trainer, and some take more time but might cost less, and then there are the others that might take less time and cost more. It's likely to take at least a year, and it can involve shadowing a course before preparing for and delivering your own course, your first course. And that's something that I found incredibly useful. Before that, my only real experience of level 3 forest school training was my own course. So it was really, really eye-opening to be a part of shadowing a course. And you sort of see it with different eyes. I think you're observing it with a different perspective. I really recommend that as a first step. You may have to pay for training or for mental support, and you may not make any significant profit for the first course that you run when all the costs are taken into account. So it's something that's definitely worth being aware of and considering when you're deciding if it's the right time for you. Okay. So then another question to consider is it going to be a viable business? And this requires you to do a bit of market research. What's in your local area? What might the demand be? Will people be prepared to travel to you? And if you're considering people traveling from a longer distance, have you got accommodation that you can offer for your trainees? Considering how many cohorts of trainees you might run in a year, and how many have you got capacity for how many students for each course? Have you also considered becoming an FSA endorsed trainer, or have you got another unique selling point that you need to use to sell your courses? Put together a business plan. So what realistically will you need to charge in order to make it worthwhile? And what are people going to be willing to pay for your course? And consider also your hidden costs. And I'd spend some time thinking about this, because I think it's definitely worthwhile, and it will set you up in a better position when you start offering your courses and ensuring that it's a viable thing for you to do. Back to you, Charlotte.
Yes, I have to say that I didn't do a business plan when I started out. And in fact, Sarah and I have done a business plan quite recently. So I would definitely recommend doing that to start with. You know, there are hidden costs, and we'll go through some of the things that you might not be aware of when you set out, because obviously when you do your training, you can probably from that work out you know how much you paid for a course, you might know about the sorts of resources you were provided with, have an idea about the time that your trainer spent delivering, marking, that sort of thing. But there are other costs that you might not be aware of. And I think it's really important to just be as realistic as possible, because although it might seem this is a great money-making opportunity, when it actually boils down to it, I think most trainers that I've spoken to kind of break even. And there's a lot of extra work that happens that, you know, we don't necessarily always budget for or put into our business plan. So another consideration is, do you have the knowledge and skills in order to be able to be an effective trainer? So have you personally got a good level of knowledge, understanding and skill in all 5 areas of Forest School? So the 5 units that you study: the practical skills, woodland environment, learning and development, planning and preparation, and delivery. So there's the sort of the knowledge that you will know about, you'll remember writing your assignments, putting together your portfolio, which requires you to demonstrate an understanding of a range of different areas. But as a trainer, you need to know much more than that. So it doesn't mean that you have to be you know, an absolute expert in every area, but you do have to have a good level of knowledge and understanding. It needs to be quite broad-based. So I've just included there some ideas. You need to have an understanding of woodland management, of ecology, ID skills. So you need to have quite a good ability yourself to be able to identify plants and animals, to understand about play and play theory, tool use, your own personal, how skilled are you, learning theories, behavior, advocacy, holding space, assessment, and supporting wide variety of learners. So, you know, you need to have a good knowledge, but also experience of doing those things. Because what you know, and it is a really broad base. And you know, what you need to think about is, have you had sufficient experience in order to be able to feel confident and to inspire confidence? Because when people come on your training, they're committing time, money, their hearts, and what they want to do is to know that you are genuine, that you've got that knowledge, and that you're going to be able to support them and enable them to complete their qualification and develop their knowledge and understanding. So if you don't have the confidence and experience in these areas, what you need to think about is, how will you, or how could you develop your skills in order to gain a deeper understanding? And what Sarah mentioned before about that idea of shadowing course, and I would really recommend that if you get a chance to do that anyway, because it's such a privilege to be able to go and see somebody else and be part of a course, and you learn so much about what you already know, but also about what you didn't know. And so, you know, that's one way that you could maybe develop your knowledge and skills, by kind of reaching out and working with other people. It could be, I mean, I'm talking a lot about training, you know, as in an individual, but also you might have somebody who you could co-train with in order to provide expertise in areas that you lack. You know, I've trained by myself for a number of years. And since mentoring Sarah, we've decided that we're going to continue training together. And that is just lovely for me. Hopefully it will be for Sarah as well. Because you bring different things to a group. And I know that when Sarah and I are training together, we have different personalities and we bring different things. So it just means that within the group, people, at different times will reach out to one or other of us. And also we can support each other. Sarah's got more knowledge and experience in certain areas than I have in others, so we can kind of develop together. So knowledge and skills is something to consider. And personal attributes, which is quite a tricky one, really, because there are within the group of trainers that I know a really wide range of personalities, and people are drawn to different personalities, and people have different things that they're really good at. But as a trainer, I think you need to, probably the most important thing is to be able to put the needs of your students first. So to be emotionally intelligent and to be able to recognize the needs of others within your group would be a key thing. So, I've just listed a few things here, which I think this was a list that Nell and I worked on a couple of years ago. So, you obviously need to be able to communicate effectively. You need to be resilient because, it's quite hard. That's physically resilient. You need to have quite a lot of stamina because those training days can be unrelenting. You think as a student, you're sitting there and it's 9 to 5. Well, as a trainer, you're having to think and plan and prepare and deliver and switch from one thing to another. So you need to be, I would say, I've not put on there, I think you need to be quite physically fit and mentally agile as well. So you need to be in a good place mentally to be able to really be open and flexible. You need to be prepared to respond to feedback and to listen and not be dogmatic. So you need to be open to other people's opinions, even if they're different from yours. So you need to be a good listener. You need to be reflective on your own practice, tenacious. Yes, I would say that definitely. Enthusiastic, passionate, approachable, honest and open. I think all of those things are what we would hope if you said, you're going to embark on a training course. That's what you would want, I would imagine, somebody who can fulfill those things. So the question is, do you have that unique mix of skills? Can you communicate things in an effective way, be flexible, be responsive to the needs of your group? Again, this is another kind of area where it's good to train with somebody else, because what one person may lack, another person may have an abundance of. But certainly something to think about. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the process a little bit, because this sort of helps to set a bit of a context, really, for what I'm going to come to next, and something that you may not know about, and I certainly didn't when I started embarking on this process. So the process of actually sort of training and assessment and that leads to your final qualification happens in stages, and there are different people involved along the way. So the first stage is that your students provide evidence for each of the criteria that are set for the qualification. So the qualification is set, it's reviewed periodically, but everybody works to the same criteria, more or less. So there's a set of criteria that all trainers work to, and what students have to do is provide evidence for each one of those. So that's your Borough School portfolio. So the evidence is presented in different ways, but that will be the second stage. It will be marked by the trainer, so either by the person who trained you, or sometimes if it's a bigger organisation, it might be marked by a tutor. So it might be marked by somebody who hasn't actually trained you. There may be resubmissions of work if the evidence submitted is not adequate to start with, but basically that will happen. And then once the trainer is satisfied that all of the criteria are met, then work is submitted for a process which we call internal quality assurance, or IQA. So what happens then is, so when I've got a group of students who have all completed and are ready to be, I feel from my point of view, yes, they've met the standards to get their level 3 qualification. I contact my internal quality assurer, and I explain these are the students that I've got, and that person then says to me, okay, I'm going to sample these students. So they might say to me they want a full portfolio from a particular student or number, or they might want certain units. And what they do is they check the work, they look at my marking and feedback, and they just ensure that that process is fair, that it is comparable, that it's appropriate, and that if I've said to somebody, yes, you've met the criteria, that they would agree that the criteria had been met. So that's an internal quality assurance process. Once that's taken place, then there is an external quality assurance process. So that is when that's done by the awarding organisation. And what they do is they then also sample my students. So they may sample the same ones that have been looked at by the IQA, or it may be a different group of students, but they would also, so these are the checks and balances that are put in place to ensure that the standard of training and the quality of marking and feedback is consistent, so that whoever you train with, what one person says, yes, that student's met the criteria, that would be the same across the board if it was with a different trainer or a different awarding organisation. Okay, so that is the process. And then the next thing I'm going to share with you are the different pathways and options that are open to you as a potential trainer. So this information, I've come up with these 3 pathways. They're not written down anywhere, but from the survey that I've done of other trainers and the routes that they have taken to become a trainer, I've concluded that they kind of fall into one of 3 different routes. There may be others that I don't know about. So if you do, then please let me know. But there may also be a slightly different experience within those routes as well. So for example, the first route is a training route, what I've called a training route. So that is where you would work with an established training organisation to undertake a level 4 qualification. Okay. There are different training organisations who offer this, and the experience and what they offer and the route and what that looks like is going to differ depending on those organisations. So I've kind of included them all in one, but just to recognise that that might be slightly different depending on who it is. The second route I've called the mentoring route, which is where you would establish a link with an existing trainer, or it could be, a couple of trainers who work together, and you would pay them or engage them to mentor you. And again, the experience of that is going to be slightly different depending on who that person is who you get to mentor you. And the third route is what I've called the go it alone route, which is where you would yourself establish a direct link with an awarding organisation and set up your own course from scratch. And again, the experience there is going to differ depending on the awarding organisation and the people who you have contact with there. So they're the kind of main pathways that I've identified. And what I'm going to do now is go through what I believe to be the pros and cons of the different routes. Okay, so I'm not advocating any one in particular. I'm hopefully going to give you, a sort of fair and true and accurate picture of the different pathways and the pros and cons of each of them. So the first one, the training route. So the benefits of this route are that if you don't have a suitable qualification to become a trainer, but you're keen to do it. So if, for example, you're a primary school teacher who is really keen to become a trainer, but you've got no experience of assessing above primary level, doing a level 4 qualification with a training organisation would enable you to get a qualification. Okay. The second pro that I've identified there is that you don't need to invest your time in writing course materials, because generally what happens is that the organisation, they have their own materials already written, which they share with you, and you use their materials in order to deliver the course. Third point, larger organisations have a number of trainers that you can work with. So, I would see that as being a benefit, because there's more people there that you could actually work alongside and benefit from their experience. And the fourth one is that the benefit of the reputation of that organisation, the access to the market. So that if they're a big organisation, that they might have a large budget for marketing, that then if you link with them, you're going to have that same access. And, potentially you're going to have support with marketing and advertising your course. So they're what I would see as being the pros. The cons are that I think of all the routes, this one is probably the most costly. So it's a relatively high financial cost to undertake the training. And as I said, it varies between organisations, but I think between the three pathways, this is probably the most costly one to do. You may need to work around set course dates. So if the organisation is training a cohort of trainers together, so you may be working alongside other trainers, which again, that could be a benefit. Those course dates might be set, so you might have to just work around those. You may be tied into the organisation, at least initially. So some organisations offer franchises, but the downside of that is that you may be committed for a certain number of courses to using the materials of that organisation and to sharing profits with them. So any money that you take for the course, the student fees, you are committed to giving a percentage of that to the organisation. The other one that somebody mentioned to me who's followed this route was that they felt that going down this route meant that they had less control to promote their own ethos, because really the ethos that you're promoting is the one of the organisation. So you have less control and less autonomy, because obviously you're working for an organisation rather than yourself. So that is the training route. So as I said, if anybody's got any other thoughts, you're very welcome to pop them in the chat. I'm going to hand over to Sarah, and I can then just have a look and see if anything's come up. So Sarah is going to talk about the route that she has done.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about the mentoring route, and the pros of this route are that you get one-to-one support and guidance, which I think I find incredibly useful and supportive. And it means that your training program can be a bespoke design. So If you want to make changes to the support that you need, if you want to have a shared training approach. So if there are elements that you want more support with, there's somebody else there who can take those aspects as well, as you're becoming more confident in certain areas. So there's always a backup, which is really nice. But having that ability to seek support and guidance on a one-to-one level is invaluable, I think. You also get to benefit from the experience of your mentor. And that means that, somebody who's done it before and has been there and has experienced running courses before, and can work alongside you and support you in the initial sort of maybe teething problems, or maybe some queries or questions and things. You've got someone who's got the experience and has done it before, and can support you with that is really useful as well. The resources and the course setup has been done and is available. Your mentor's done that. But so it's available and you haven't got to do it from scratch, which is a huge pro. But at the same time, there's also opportunity for discussion and for input and adding in sections that maybe you feel are important to the individual, or there's opportunities for having autonomy in there. So it works really well in that you can decide what you'd like to include in your training, and bits that you maybe want to have more of an emphasis on. You have to find someone with the capacity to do this. It would be a downside sometimes. Forest school leaders are often very busy people with lots of different hats and maybe lots of different aspects and busy timetables. So it can be quite hard. I was fortunate in that I managed to convince Charlotte to take me on. I think that could be a challenge that I think a lot of times people might not have that capacity. And I think shadowing a course, I mentioned before, is really important, but that would mean that you'd need to then slot in with existing course dates from your mentor. So it can mean that the route could take longer than a training route. The costs might not be as clear from the outset. It depends a little bit on the time that your mentor is giving you, and that can change depending on the support that you might need, or it's not always something that is set in stone from the outset, which is one of the benefits. It's quite flexible, so you can take a bigger or a smaller role initially, but it means that costs can change as you go on. And you're relying on someone else, which can be tricky for them sometimes. So potentially there could be issues if something goes wrong, or if you don't get on, or if you have different working styles. So it's something to consider and bear in mind. But I was lucky in that way. So that's good. Yeah, I think those are the main pros and cons for the mentoring route. All right, Charlotte's going to talk about the third option, which is the go it alone route.
Thank you, Sarah. I think this is a very brave route. I actually only know one person who's gone it alone, but there probably are others. So this is where you establish a link directly with an awarding organisation. So you establish a link. You then write your materials. The awarding organisation will be able to give you support, and they may be able to give you materials that you could use as well. So awarding organisations do have materials. But you're going to have to very much spend the time personalising the materials and the course to you. So the pros of this is that it's probably the cheapest option, because basically it's, you're not having to pay for anybody else to be involved. So that really cuts the costs down, and you've got high levels of autonomy because it's down to you to design your course. As long as it meets the criteria that the awarding organisation sets, then you've got that choice there. But it's quite a lonely thing to do, I would imagine. It's likely to be the most time consuming of all of the routes. So although it would save you money in terms of it's not going to cost a lot, it's going to cost you a lot in terms of time, because you're going to have to start from scratch. You would get support from the awarding body, but not from established and experienced trainers. So, and unless you're Yeah, you won't unless you're working with somebody else. So there's fewer opportunities with this route for co-learning, from learning from each other. And I think what your experience, I certainly know when I trained to be a trainer, um, I followed a similar route to Sarah in that I was mentored, and I just learnt such a huge amount from shadowing um, a level 3 course that was different to the one that I had done and was run by a different organisation. And I just think that if you choose to go it alone, what you're bringing there is your experience from your training as a level 3 forest school leader. What you're not going to be able to access it necessarily is any other experience, other ways of doing things. And for me, that's how we grow and develop, by actually talking with each other and finding out how other people do things, even if you find out and think, well, actually I wouldn't do it that way. It just kind of affirms and gives you lots of time to think and consider. Okay, so those are the pros and cons as I see them, of those 3 different pathways. I just wanted at this point to just clarify a little bit in terms of who does what with those relationships. And I'm sorry that this diagram is a little slightly confusing, but and there may be other things in here that I've not included, but just to explain how it works with the internal quality assurance that I mentioned before, which is part of that process. So in the middle there, that's how I started. So basically, I was a single trainer. Charlotte's Forest School is the name of my training organisation, but I was linked with an established centre. And that centre provided me with my IQA. So what used to happen was I would set up and run my courses, and the centre actually looked at a sample of my work, and they did that IQA process. They were directly linked with the awarding organisation rather than me. So what that meant was that I didn't have to do any of the kind of admin related to registering people onto the training. That was all done for me. I didn't need, the EQA process was managed by the centre. That wasn't me. So that's how I started off. So I was a single trainer linked with the centre. The situation that I'm in now is to the right of the screen, which is now I am actually a centre. So Charlotte's Forest School is registered as a centre, and that is a whole other lot of work to do. So, I was really pleased to start with that I was able to link with another centre. And that's the situation that Sarah's been. Sarah's not had to set herself up as a centre, but actually she's training under my centre. So there's lots of policies and procedures that you have to have in place to become a centre. And then the centre has that relationship with the awarding organisation. So again, you as a centre have to pay registration fees for your students, and have EQA processes happening. So that's the difference. When I became a single trainer and a centre, then I no longer had that IQA built in to the centre. So I had to then look for my own person to do my IQA. So I engaged somebody who is trained as an IQA. And there's lots of people out there. So some trainers are also trained to be IQAs. It's not something I've done, but I know quite a lot of the endorsed trainers have also done the IQA training, which means that then you can IQA for other people. So you can't IQA for yourself, because that would be a little bit self-defeating, but you can then IQA for other people. So I don't know much about the course because I've not done it, but basically that would be an option, and that could be another income stream for you if that was something that you wanted to do. If you are with a training organisation, so that's to the left of the screen, usually the training organisation would also be a centre. And so they would have their IQA processes built in, and they would have that direct relationship with the awarding organisation. So, you know, you as an individual, if you went with a training organisation, you wouldn't need to worry about that whole process of IQA, EQA registering people, because that all would happen by the training organisation. Okay, so some additional costs to cover. I'm going to hand over to Sarah to talk about additional costs.
So things that we haven't already mentioned that you might need to consider are insurance is a big one. So your personal liability insurance, but you also need professional indemnity insurance if you're going to be a trainer. You also think about insurance for your woodland. If it's your own woodland, you need to have your woodland insurance, or if you're using woodland that belongs to somebody else, you need to make sure that that has got its insurance so that you can use it. Another cost is the equipment. So you might already have your forest school set up and have your tools and your resources that you use for forest school, but you need to also then consider, depending on the size of your cohort, whether you've got enough tools for the training course, enough sawhorses, things like that, that you might just have one or two of, making sure you've got access to more for your trainees. Things like consumable resources as well. So whether they're some of the things that you might be providing for your trainees, such as we provide them with a piece of rope, things like that. We also provide them with some books and the FSA book as well. You also need to consider the centre registration fees, as Charlotte mentioned on the slide before. So thinking about incorporating that into the costs as well as your IQA, so your internal quality assurance and your external quality assurance fees as well. Each of those will have fees associated with them, but are an essential part of the process. Also thinking about your marketing and recruitment budget and the time that you need to consider for that, and your strategy. It takes quite a lot of thought and time to consider where you're going to advertise, what your advertising material is going to look like, who are the people that you're going to be targeting, the target market, and all of those sorts of things, and thinking about the budget that you're prepared to pay for that. Franchise fees, if you're linked to a training organisation, that might be something that's part of the process for you, so that's something that's to consider. And if you're considering following the endorsed trainer route, that also has annual fees associated with that as well. So those are a few of the extra costs to consider as well during the process that might not be initially obvious when you're starting the training plans. All right, we're going to move next on to other considerations. And Charlotte's going to talk about other considerations.
Okay, so other things that you might need to think about before you make the decision, or you know, when you're thinking about which route you might go on. First of all, it's an obvious one really, but do you have a suitable site that you're able to use? Is there access to shelter if needed? And you might want to think about the time of year. I know I've run my courses at all different times of year, and I've now got a really clear idea of when, for my particular site, when is the best time of year for me to run my training courses. So you know, and although we try to where possible, I think the last two courses we have run entirely outdoors, but you know, depending on the time of year and the weather and where you are in the country to a certain extent, you may need to be able to have access to shelter, because there's obviously some elements of the course which are more practical, some which are more theoretical, but yeah, it's good to have that if needed. If you are going to be setting up on your own, so in relation to the slide I showed a couple of slides ago, will you think about setting yourself up as a centre right from the beginning with a direct link to an awarding organisation, or will you join a centre? And I would very much say, if you are in that position and you have the opportunity to join a centre, certainly there's so much to think about just becoming a trainer. I think, you know, to not have to worry about that at that time would be of benefit. We've mentioned already a few times about the benefits of shadowing somebody else. And even if your trainer, the person you trained with, you thought was absolutely brilliant, just, you know, if there's an opportunity for you to shadow somebody else, there's likely to be a fee associated with that. But, you know, I would very much recommend that. The last 3 bullet points I'm going to cover in a little bit more detail. So they are, you know, to consider at this point whether or not you want to become an FSA endorsed trainer, because if you do, it's worth thinking about right from the beginning, so you set yourself up to hit the ground running there. Second one down, if you want to train with a training organisation, you just need to be aware that they might not all deliver courses that enable students to become FSA recognised providers. And if this is something that's important to you, which we believe it should be, because it's you know, a hallmark of quality forest school, you know, you need to think about, is that something that's going to be an option with the groups that you're working with? And the final bullet point there is about which awarding organisation will you work through, because there are lots of them around. So this is really just, we're getting towards the end now. So I will just go through these and then we will maybe think about any questions that people might have. So the first point there then, so if you want to become an FSA endorsed trainer, it's a route that can support somebody who's setting themselves up, because through the FSA endorsed trainer scheme, which Nell might be happy to talk a little bit more about, the scheme actually sets out the benchmarks that all the endorsed trainers have to evidence that they incorporate into their training, and that's how they then get the endorsed trainer certification to say that they are delivering quality provision. And so if you decide that that's something that you want to do, and the benefits of that might be that you are then going to be able to advertise your training on the FSA website, you're going to be able to have a pin on the map. So, you know, it's certainly something that when I was considering, do I want to become an endorsed trainer, I was really keen to, because I thought, you know, for me, the key thing at the time, I'd say it's probably changed now, but the key thing was because I thought this is going to support me with marketing my courses. So if you are going to be setting up your own course, either from scratch or with the support of a mentor, you may find it useful to refer to the benchmarks at the start and to keep the process of becoming an endorsed trainer in mind. So the different stages in that process, which are all on the FSA website. And that way, you know that you're going to be setting up quality provision from the start. And it's worth also noting that you can go through, so there's 3 stages to becoming an FSA endorsed trainer, and stage 1 you can go through before you've even trained a cohort. So it's just about you having the documentation, the evidence in place and you don't have to have trained a cohort, and you can get put onto the map, the FSA on the FSA website, which is good for marketing processes. I don't know if is there anything else you wanted to add there now?
No, but I'm going to stick around at the end in case anyone wanted to dive into it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. The second point I said that I would expand a little bit more on is the one about you just checking what qualification your students will get. So this is particularly if you are going to be linking with a training organisation. So there are certain qualifications which are accepted by the FSA for becoming a recognised provider. So the recognised provider scheme is again another one that Nell looks after. Sarah's a recognised provider of Forest School, but with the sessions that she runs as well. And again, this is another quality mark that I'm sure you know about. I don't know if quality probably is quality mark not the right term. No, I don't know if quality right.
It's a way of demonstrating publicly that you facilitate Forest School in accordance with all 6 principles. And actually, just looking at the people who are here on the meeting tonight, there's hordes of recognised providers. There's not just Sarah, not just Sarah and I. There's also lovely Sonia hiding there, and I also feel like I saw Annie as well, who's there but behind a blank screen. So yes, lots of recognised providers.
Right. So yeah, so basically you just need to check what is the qualification that your students will get if they train with you through a particular training organisation. So there's a list there for you to refer to. And then the third point, my final one, is about which awarding organisation. So there are loads. And if you're going to set up a direct relationship with an awarding organisation, then you need to just be aware that not all of them have been are specifically supported by the FSA. So the ones that are listed on the FSA website, which the link is there for you. But those, it's a group of, how many is it now? It's quite a number, isn't it? Oh, sorry, I put you on the spot there.
No, it's all right. It's probably something like 11, 12, something like that. So the vast majority of awarding organisations who offer the Forest School qualification are supported by the FSO. But I understand that there are only 2 that are not supported by the FSA because they offer a legacy qualification that wasn't updated when the qualification was last reviewed.
Okay, so it's just worth checking then that so you could click on that link and just make sure if you're thinking, but also that would be a good place to start if you're thinking about establishing a direct link with an awarding organisation, would be to actually look at that list and maybe start a conversation. You know, within the endorsed trainers group, we have a variety of awarding organisations that we're linked with, and you know, they're all quite different. They all have their little foibles, pluses and minuses, but I think the one I'm with is the only one that where they wear skirts to the ceilidh at the Forest School conference. I don't know if that's something I should maybe so there may be awarding organisations at the conference if you're going to it, and certainly I think that was possibly, I found being at the conference and actually just having an informal chat about, this is what I'm kind of thinking of, you know, what are the options. That's a really good way of kind of progressing. And there was just a point there, I don't know if it does apply, but if anybody is thinking about setting up training overseas, you would need to find a UK-based awarding organisation who would be prepared to support you, because not all of them will. And you will need to consider if they're not English speaking, translation of work and language, which is going to be potentially an additional cost to have translators or to have work transcribed. So, okay, so that is me and us done, I think, Sarah, unless you've got anything else that you wanted to add in at this stage.
Not at the moment, no.
And I think, Matt, you're going to be very pleased with us because we finished earlier than we planned.
I was watching. I was waiting for 21:16 to come off on my clock.
Well, you know, we've got time for questions, or equally, we're very happy to just finish early if that's if there are no questions. But does anybody have any questions?
No one's raising their hands.
Shall I just stop sharing my screen a minute and then I can see everybody? Oh, there we are. Somebody's
Ah, hi, Maria.
Maria.
Hi guys. Sorry, I've got my little beardie because I've been out all day. He's my son, so he's with us. This is Indio. He's been with us. He needed some heat from Mama.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. Thank you, by the way. I just wanted to say, wow, that was brilliant. And I became a trainer myself a few years ago, but gosh, I wish that information was there before. It's so hard, isn't it? It's just there's just so much of what you've done is just not there and not available. So many people are so disillusioned about it. So thank you so much for doing this. It's really useful, and I hope that this can be it is recorded, isn't it, and then shared
Yes.
with others. My question was, so it's interesting. I did it the other way around. So I was part of a centre. There was 3 of us, so we were IQAing each other and assessing. So anyhow, without making it too much about me, I've gone backwards to the route that you did, and now I'm on my own because my partner, who founded it, had a stroke very sadly, Patrick Harrison, a few years ago. So I've continued waving the flag on my own. But my question was, I've had, for example, the wildlife. So the only trainings in Southwest London at the moment are myself and Surrey Wildlife Trust, and they know me. We help each other and support each other. I'm always very transparent and supporting other trainers. And they said, "Oh, Maria, if you want us to mark you, let us mark your work." I was thinking, oh, would there be a conflict of interest there? I don't know. Yeah, my question, I think, was maybe to all of you, those who have the experience in it. Can another awarding body mark you? Yeah, is that straight up forward enough? Because so I mark my own. I also am an IQA, and the awarding body wanted to make me an EQA this year, which is wonderful and a great honor. But in terms of my own marking, because it does pile on. I mean, I've got 600 pages to mark over the next few days, 6 portfolios sitting there. And I know the Wildlife Trust, who train themselves, they train us, and they said, oh, you can just, we can mark for you. What do you think?
My thoughts would be, I don't see why not, personally, because as long as they're people who have been through the training process, I mean, there could be issues in terms of maybe not knowing the students in the same way that you do, but within larger organizations, they often have people marking, they just split up the portfolios, and they may have somebody marking the portfolio of a different cohort that they haven't taught. So I don't personally see an issue with that. I don't know what other people think.
I think maybe the awarding body might have, I can obviously I'll ask them, but it was interesting because they said they always used to mark each other, apparently. They didn't always mark, it wasn't the person facilitating that was always marking their work because they had too many of them. And one of the trainers said, oh, Maria, I need some extra cash. I'm saving up for a mortgage. I'll do some marking, send some money my way. So it's a lovely way to be transparent and to help each other and create more employment. And somebody helped me, but she was saying, I'm not sure. She said, you have to check with the awarding body about being a level 4 because she doesn't have, but I said to her, you don't need a level 4 to be a trainer. Obviously, we all know that. So I just wondered if anybody here had that experience.
I know that other FSA endorsed trainers, they will train or co-train a cohort, and the people that actually mark the portfolios might not be the trainer or the co-trainer, so they will contract it out to a team of people that they have trained and that they rely upon. Whether I don't know about the aspect of your question, which was about the fact that they sit within another training organisation. I
Yeah,
guess that would
exactly.
be
So
one
we
for
should
the
be
AO.
competition, but because we're not, because we're so transparent, we just want to help each other. So it's quite sweet.
Mm.
Really. Just shows you the
Yeah.
forest spirit. But thank you for sharing. I'll check with the awarding body as well, just so there's no conflict of interest.
I mean, presumably, if you're all using the same criteria, so there's no reason why somebody couldn't, and there'll be an IQA process, won't there? So that marking that they do will go through the IQA process and EQA process. So I don't see it as being an issue at all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, both Sarah and Charlotte, for your time. It's been incredibly helpful, and I really do hope you'll consider allowing us to put it up on, certainly on the website, but maybe in YouTube, because I really do think that this is a one-stop shop for all the information that that people want to know before they have, before they start their journey to be a trainer. And of course, there is, as you publicize as well, there's the FSA book. So there's a bit of stuff in there as well. But yes, amazing. Well, I think we should wrap it up there. Long days for lots of people, and I hope to see as many people as can make it to the conference in a couple of weeks' time. Well, yeah, it's next weekend, isn't it? Not this coming weekend, but the next one. So looking forward to that.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you.
Matt.
Thanks, everyone.